Welcome to Round Hill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy in the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about when we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Redefine for us.
I daily. Sometimes minute by minute, some might say. So that's where we are. It is week 28, and we have a 2-pager.
Yeah, this is always a long story.
It's a long story. This is Pentecost. It's the story of Pentecost. This is Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 8, and then 12 through 21. Here we go. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now, there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment because each one heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Aren't all these who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our native language?" Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" Some, however, made fun of them and said, "They have had too much wine." Then Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice and addressed the crowd. "Fellow Jews and all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. Listen carefully to what I say. These people are not drunk as you suppose. It is only 9 a.m. No, this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will show wonders in the heavens above and signs on the earth below. Blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Woof.
The day of Pentecost.
There was much happening there.
Yep, that's a very active passage.
So I'm confused by how Peter's explanation is an explanation, is I think where I want to start. I mean, the low-hanging fruit is how Peter's explanation that it's 9 a.m. is why they're not drunk, but I will avoid that because it's too obvious, even though it's very funny.
Yeah.
It's only 9? I mean, really?
Yeah.
But, like, so what about Peter's prophecy? So it's a prophecy of, raise his voice, the prophecy spoken by the prophet Joel. So what is Peter is saying is related to what is happening, I guess? How does what Peter say tie into what's happening?
There you go.
I got there.
Perfect.
That, thank you.
Great. That's a good question. Yeah. And why does he feel like he has to explain it? That's one of my questions.
Yes.
You know, it's happened.
It's happened.
And people are, they're curious about it.
Yeah.
Some are amazed and they're perplexed.
Yes.
In fact, if you go through this passage and you see that, there are a number of words that stand out for me: violent wind, amazed, perplexed. Clearly, there are things going on here that seem like they don't fall within the normal bandwidth of daily events.
Yeah.
So that much seems to be for sure. So, in some ways, Peter's the first of a whole long line of people who have been trying to explain this ever since, and probably not doing a very good job of it.
Sure.
A couple of things I would say. So, at this point in time, you've got people coming into Jerusalem for what is basically, I think, an agricultural festival. Pentecost, the word connects with the word 50.
Okay.
So we're 50 days out at this point from Easter.
Okay.
And the fact that they're all together, there are people from all around the Mediterranean who've come together for this major festival. And they think they're going to be doing what they've done every other time, I guess, that they've met, but something completely different happens this time. Jesus has indicated to his followers that they were going to be infused with the Holy Spirit. In fact, in one gospel, he breathes it into them. He literally, gives it to them directly. But there's this sense that he wanted them to wait for it. They waited, and guess what? Here it is. So one of the things that happens here is that each person is touched by this Spirit in a unique way, but it also touches everybody at the same time.
Okay.
So it's this great image of, the individual in the collective. The individual is still the individual, but there's a very strong sense of unity here. And I think that what Peter, is just trying to say to people, don't discount this experience just because it doesn't fit into the range of what you consider normal spiritual experience.
Okay.
Something new is happening. And the way that Christians have looked back at this event, they often call this the birthday of the church. Right? It has that sort of overtone. I think over the years that's changed, actually. People don't see it quite as much as that. The Pentecost is maybe that, but it's also a lot of other things. So I think Peter is simply saying to them, first of all, we've had an experience that doesn't fit, so don't discount it. Okay. But the second thing he says to them is that, actually, this is the fulfillment of something that was promised a long, long time ago, which is why he quotes Joel.
Okay.
So Joel is one of the prophets from several centuries, actually, probably 4 centuries before Jesus was born or Peter was born. But he had this dream that the Spirit would touch people regardless of gender, class, economic background. He gives all these different categories. And again, it galvanizes them into a collective religious experience. Peter's saying, you know what? That's back. It's happening again.
Okay.
And now it's going to unite all of us in this love and expression of care for the world that we see in Jesus.
Okay.
But it's going to give us a whole new range of power and possibility. So these are the things that I think he's trying to communicate.
Am I being overly literal by the fact that in Joel's prophecy, no one's actually speaking in tongues?
Yeah, it's not there, right?
Right.
Yeah, you've got there's a new thing going on.
Yeah.
In Peter's time.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, that experience of speaking in tongues, there's a Greek word for it, which I love. It's called glossolalia.
You've mentioned that before. It's so good.
Any chance I can get, I'm going to talk about glossolalia.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
But, the speaking in tongues part comes up in other letters in the New Testament as well. Paul has to deal with it because some people, they just love doing it.
Yeah.
And Paul's saying, you know what? It's really not that necessary. I know you think you're cool, but it's not. And I do want to say this with all due respect, because within the Pentecostal tradition of the church, glossolalia is a very important element of spirituality.
Okay.
Myself, I've never heard of it. I've never heard it.
Okay.
I've never talked with anyone who's quote unquote spoken in tongues.
Okay.
But there are still, there are large denominational affiliations around the world that for them, this matters a lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to have mattered much for Joel.
Yeah.
Joel is more about, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. I mean, if the rest of that passage had been torn off for some reason and we didn't have it, we'd still get the gist of it. And I love the universality of it. In fact, I think that, this is something maybe we're missing a little bit today, or missing a lot in Christianity, because we tend to be so congregation focused. What's my church doing? And by that, we don't mean the church universal. We mean the church on the corner of 4th and Main, right? Or whatever.
Right.
And this is all about this universal spirit that's just going to cover, it's going to touch people all around the world. And we really don't have that sense anymore.
Yeah.
So this is very important to Peter because I think he thinks that that old dream is coming back. You know, we're going to sense that universality again.
I actually, when I was a young person, I was on a trip and was actually at a church service at a Pentecostal church and got to experience a sort of Pentecostal experience. I can't think of a better word than that, frankly.
Did you hear the speaking in tongues?
I heard the speaking in tongues, and it was fascinating. And I did not have an experience of it myself in my person, but it seemed like a very very personal experience. You know, something like very, very visceral seems like a word. It seems like a very an outpouring. It seemed like it's something that was like when it came upon people, it was like they could not hold it in.
Yeah.
It was something like it was really very, very passion filled. And I thought it was very cool. I mean, it sticks in your mind, especially I want to say I was probably like 11.
Oh, wow.
You know, very.
Could be a big impression.
Yeah, leaves a moment.
Yeah.
It was very cool. So I was, for Pentecost, I was put back in my mind of Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
You know, the Pentecostal church there.
You know, the question I bring to this, it's a little puzzling to me. You know, it says that all of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. So a little later down, though, a little further down in this story, it says that basically they get to hear what's being said in their own native language.
It's like, the funny thing is in this story, it's an actual and someone else's full realized language. Yeah. You know, not necessarily, unto themselves divine language that's between you and God, which is sometimes an expression of Pentecostal.
Everybody understands what's going on, even though something mysterious is being said.
Yeah.
Or the vehicle for what's being said is mysterious.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of stupefying part of this for people, you know, the amazing and perplexing part of it. So I'm just curious about that. I think it opens up all kinds of interesting questions.
I always liked how I was very big as a young person. You can tell a lot about my upbringing by this today's story time. I was very big into the Left Behind series.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And towards the end, how they handled languages, because there were a lot of people from different countries all together, and they handled languages by everyone could understand one another.
Oh, wow.
They just made it so that everyone could understand another through this divine language understanding. I just thought, what a beautiful thing. You know, everyone was speaking their own language, but they could understand one another. And I think there was also that undertone of they could understand one another. That understanding was that double meaning also as well.
Yeah,
which I thought was really beautiful.
Not just knowing the words of the language, but the meaning and really deep understanding of what the other person's trying to say.
Yeah, yeah.
So, part of the other background of this story is that the story of Pentecost, as it's told in the book of Acts, is sometimes interpreted as a reversal of the story of Babel in the beginning of the book of Genesis.
Oh, really?
So there's this effort in the story of Babel the humankind wants to create a tower. And this tower is going to go all the way up into the heavens. And so those who are in the heavens get particularly nervous about this and say, we really don't want them up here. So they confuse them by literally forcing them to speak in other languages. Oh. Now they can no longer communicate well, and they can't finish the tower, and so that's as far as it goes. So now you've got Acts, which is reversing all of that. Now all of these people who are from different lands, not different traditions. He's really addressing a Jewish audience here, but still they come from different places, different dialects. Now they can all communicate. And I think that's an interesting part of this as well, especially, we, for all of our technological devices, people complain about how difficult it is to communicate.
Right.
So here's a story that is a lot about communication and clarity.
Right.
And I love your, the double meaning of the word understand, not just knowing what the words are, but what the other person is trying to say using those words.
Well, and it's worth saying it's easier. More people, how many people just in our country, within our country speak English more than ever. We all speak English just in Connecticut, and how many people have trouble communicating and connecting than ever. And it's so much easier to have translating apps, and we have all these technological eases, and it's harder than ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was a bumbly way of saying what you just said.
It's still challenging.
It is still challenging. It is challenging.
So it's it's one of these stories that falls outside the boundaries of what we, I think of as normal, or, like, what is happening here? Why was the story told in this way? But it allows for, the extraordinary, the unexpected. Here are all of these, there's an intrusion of something they hadn't planned.
Yeah.
And I think we, oftentimes when we think of something spiritual, we think of something calming, restful, breathing, all things that are within our grasp. Here's something that's none of those.
I sort of think of this story as mystical. Would that be?
I never know what to do with that word mystical.
Okay,
but
that's fair.
No, I think mystical actually, right? It often talks about experiences that people have between themselves and the other,
Sure.
right? The transcendent. So yes, it is. It's a word that could be used here, I think, for sure. But to me, it's important because there is a freedom about this spirit, and Jesus points to that freedom, that is something that's beyond prediction, control, manipulation. It comes at its own time. It has its own agenda. And that turns out to be good news because it can't be thwarted decisively by the forces of the world. It will find a way around and through and under and over until it gets work done that it needs to be doing.
I also feel like this story is one of those ones at least for me, it doesn't quite fit into my perfect little buttoned up box.
Yep.
It's like my sense of things and my sort of Northeastern sensibilities of things being tidy.
Right.
And a little more, reserved spiritually. And it's just a little more flamboyant.
It's not that.
It makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. Good.
And that's probably, I guess, okay. That has to be. Darn it. Right?
I think discomfort is a great way to conclude the conversation. That's what it was supposed to do.
Darn.
Sorry.
It's almost like you planned it, Ed. All right, final thoughts. What you got for us?
I keep zeroing in on this phrase, amazed and perplexed.
Amazed.
And when we're amazed and perplexed, we can choose to shut it down. So I don't want any more of that conversation. Or we can say, what's the invitation here? And stay with that and see where it leads.
I like it. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all so much for joining us today on Round Hill Radio. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.